a spot on the floor, he dries it up and maybe wipes it with like a wet cloth with soap on it. So now there's no perceptible qualities. And then he pours water on it, and it goes beyond where we were, and the water came to the spot. Obviously, he poured it on. The water didn't change because he got rid of anything that would have changed it, or he put enough water that it wouldn't change. He dried up the excess urine, so the water wasn't increased in mass from the urine, and the spot is now pure because he made sure that after the water went on it, there's not going to be any smell or anything. Then with that, the water that's left there is pure and unpurifying. And then in the case of like a garment we have a garment, and it's heavily soiled with urine, but the person dries it out or whatever, or rinses it and then wrings it out. Then they put it in a bucket, and then they pour water on, and maybe it's stubborn enough that they have to put soap. And if the water's really soapy, we call it changed water. So at that point, there's not purification occurring; it's just washing, like getting out the qualities. So then the person wrings it out and pours that out, and then fills the bucket up again. So the first soapy water would be impure, but the second, then he fills it up, and so the water's poured onto the garment and not the reverse. And then obviously he got rid of most of it the first time, so the water's not changed. And he wrung it out, so the water wasn't increased significantly in mass, detectably in mass, from urine. And now, because he's taken the effort to remove any stubborn odor, when he takes the garment out and wrings it out, it'll no longer be an odor, and the garment's pure. So then the water that's left in the bucket, once the garment separates from it, is now pure and impurifying. So those are two examples. Then the sister's question. So basically, you have to know that you have to wash it. You have to know that you have to remove the actual physical filth, as well as the taste, color, and smell. And then you should know these conditions, basically, for the water being pure and unpurifying. And washing machines pretty much fulfill these conditions, except with something that's real stubborn. So then the sister's question comes, what about an odor that is difficult to remove? So that's a question that's answered, alhamdulillah. So an odor or a color, not taste, and nobody tastes najasa, but if we were to say that there is a taste of najasa, that's an issue. An odor by itself or a color by itself that is difficult to remove, the object will still be pure. Okay? So if you're washing away an odor or a color and they're difficult to remove, the object is still pure. So that brings them to mind the question, what do you mean by difficulty? The criteria for, or the test of difficulty, if we want to put it in real simple terms, is that you wash it 3 times with like scrubbing or scratching or the appropriate type of application of friction, of elbow grease to that you're doing. Some things you're going to use a scrub brush, a hard surface you could actually scratch over it. A garment you don't want to scratch it because you might mess it up, but you might use a brush or rub it against itself. But basically you apply friction and wash it 3 times and use the appropriate cleaning agent. Whether it's soap, whether it's shout, whether it's bleach, whatever. So basically you've tried 3 times using some elbow grease and whatever cleaning agent you would use on that type of garment. If a color remains by itself, like the color of blood, or an odor remains by itself, then the garment is still, or the object is still pure. So what does that mean? That means like difficult things, you want to spot them for najasa before you throw them in the washing machine, because the issue is if you throw it in the washing machine and you didn't spot it, so then you don't know if you've done the test of difficulty or not. When it comes out, it and the washing machine and the whole load is impure. So that's an issue. You like difficult stains of najasa you want to spot. And then if you spotted them and they didn't, and then the color remains or a little bit of smell remains, then it's pure. You could just throw it in with the rest of the laundry. and then, a lot of times gradually it'll come out, but once you get to that point, it's pure, and you don't have to sweat it. So then, what about things, there's a level that's called impossible to remove. And impossible means that the only way to remove it is to cut it off the piece of cloth. Cut it off whatever you're washing. Like, for instance, there's something so foul on a garment, the only way you'll get rid of it is by cutting it off. At that point, color and odor can remain together or also taste, basically. So at that point, it can remain, however, it's excused. It's not pure, but it's excused. The difference between excused and pure is if you're later able to remove it, at the excused point you have to. Whether at the point when at the level of difficulty when we say it's pure, you don't have to do anything else, you don't have to worry about it. And that's a blessing from being from the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because the Banu Israel, they had to purify things by cutting them off. Like their removal of filth, in the case of garments, was by cutting it away. Whereas for us, alhamdulillah, we don't have to do that. We just, by the barakah of the Prophet Muhammad, and Allah revealed in the Quran to him, وَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً طَهُورًا. We've sent down from the sky pure, purifying water. Alhamdulillah. And the Prophet ﷺ, in terms of washing away, one example of urine, but that applies generally to filth. When a desert Arab came into the mosque and urinated in a corner of the mosque, the Prophet ﷺ, they were going to, step to him. The Prophet ﷺ told them to not, and then afterwards explained to him that the mosques were a place of worship and it wasn't acceptable to urinate in them, and just ordered them to pour like a quantity of water over the filth. And alhamdulillah, that legislates for us removing filth by washing. So that is a synopsis of washing filth. And alhamdulillah, if you review that, you'll see that it's pretty easy to understand then. And as long as you work on the difficult spots, if you throw it in a washing machine, it essentially fulfills those conditions. The wash cycle, forget it. The soap changes the water so that it's pure but no longer purifying. However, that gets rid of the qualities of the filth and then wrings it out by spinning, so that when the second cycle comes in, that should purify everything that's in there. And actually, I've tested second cycles, and the amount of soap in them is not so much that the water's not purifying. And then after that, typically I think North American washing machines, there's a third cycle, and that should certainly purify everything. And the water came on, the things, it's not changed, the things come away pure, and because of the spins, they shouldn't increase in mass. The water shouldn't increase in mass, and so we're in pretty good shape there. Yes, sir. Wa alaikum salam.
Fabric softener, like you have to do the rinse because you add it to the water.
That again, that's going to be in the first cycle, and that will affect its purifying. It'll make the water. First of all, the question was about fabric softener. If it changed water so much that we couldn't call it just water, we'd have to call it water that's now slick from fabric softener or like soapy water. Then it makes the water no longer purifying but still pure. But because there's 2 more cycles that will come through, those 2 cycles or even 1 will purify what's ever in there. Yeah. And Allah knows best. Go ahead.
So with the difficulty, if you put a big garment that's in the washer, when it's being washed, it's not that's only considered 1 cycle of the 3 times from the difficulty.
Because you're not applying elbow grease there. Like you have to apply some sort of appropriate friction to the spot. Yeah. For the question was, do cycles in a washing machine count as washing? One of the washings of washing away difficult filth, and the answer was they do not, because you're not applying significant friction to the spot. So basically, you have to scrub it or scratch it or rub it together or whatever. You have to give it some elbow grease, in addition to washing it and using a cleaning agent like soap or bleach or whatever. Yes, from the ladies?
So at the time that you didn't know the information, you wouldn't be accountable. But once you did know the information, like all that bodily things that you did, would you be accountable for that?
question is, if you were not aware of this, what's your accountability? And the answer is that the Shafi'i school is really tough in najasa, and the likelihood is that that one of the other schools will carry you. And if there's a specific instance you know about, you could ask about it. But otherwise, a general rule of thumb that our shuyukh gave for these type of questions is, from here on, make sure you're doing it right. And Allah knows best. Did you have a question, Tahir? I was kind of working across. I thought I saw you in your...
No, so my brain is just moving.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Yeah, khair. So it seemed like we only covered a little bit, but actually we covered a lot. And in the next lesson, we'll be able to just come back over filth pretty quickly. And he's mentioning lists and exceptions, but for the most part, we've covered what's significant in this chapter, inshallah ta'ala. And if you read around in Reliance and so forth, inshallah, with the summaries we gave you of the conditions, it should make more sense now. And Allah knows best. And we'll continue with this next week. And please recite Fatiha, seeking from Allah sincere, accepted works, beneficial knowledge, good teaching, inviting to guidance, and Allah give happiness thereby to the heart of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that the reward of this Fatiha go to our parents, teachers, Sheikhs, those who may owe rights in the presence of the Prophet Muhammad. Allahumma salli wa sallam wa baraka alayhi wa alihi. Fatiha.